Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to our last session of seminar series in 2025. I'm absolutely delighted to have here with us today Kim Munro, who's going to be talking to us about documentary filmmaking. So the title of her talk is Your Collective Energy is Stunning: Archives, Theatre and Embodied Documentary. So the next hour is yours, Kim. And we resume with questions about that time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. So I think, yes, you should see. Okay, I'm going to pop you so I can just see. Yeah, you over here. Nice. Okay, so thank you, Agatha, and nice to be here. I'm coming from, I'm in Australia, I'm in Adelaide, so this is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people. So paying respects to elders past and present and, the traditional owners of this land, tens of thousands of years of storytelling history here. So my talk is Your Collective Energy is Stunning, which is a quote, and it's I'll come to that throughout the presentation. I am a documentary filmmaker, but I'm going to talk about some other forms of documentary making throughout this presentation. So what I'm going to talk about is really one project, and I'm going to start from the beginning, the conceptualization through some iterations and how it evolved into the final project. It's really a 3-year project. So yeah, there's sort of many twists and turns that it took along the way. And so, yeah, so the project that I'm talking about is called The Art of Work is a Work of Art. So I'm going to begin by just giving a little bit of a background to this place, and because place is really important to this project. So you can see a little map here of it's quite small, but that's Adelaide there. So if you're familiar with Australia at all, there's Melbourne down here, Sydney, Brisbane here. So these are the 3 major cities, Canberra, the capital, and then I'm over here in Adelaide. And Adelaide is it's a small city, a little bit of a regional city, maybe 1.4 million people, around that. But it became quite a magnet for creative people, artists, theatre makers, and queer and gay people in the 70s because of this premiere of the state. So it was South Australia was the first state in Australia to legalise sort of homosexuality, and this was the premier who was gay, and he was notable for wearing these pink shorts. So that's Don Dunstan. So this is just a little bit of background because it sets the scene to this place as a moment in time when there was lots of possibility. Lots of creative people came for the sort of the open sort of atmosphere of the state and the city. And it's in a little area to the north of the city called Port Adelaide. And Port Adelaide has a lot of shipping, working class history. So this is an image of the shipyards here. So all of this sort of comes together to create a culture, you have working class history. There was a suburb nearby that a lot of lesbians moved to. It became this sort of lesbian heartland, creative workers, shared houses, working class history, and also First Nation Aboriginal history as well. So this is the place that I situate my work, and it's a theatre that was established in the 1980s, 1984, called Vitalstatistix. So I'm going to play this little video just to give you a bit of background to the theatre from where the project emerged from.
We talk about Vitalstatistix having deep roots and long branches. So we're very much embedded in our community of Port Adelaide on Yartapuulti, and we're very much creating a particular place for artists from around the country, as well as South Australian artists, to make work that's kind of imbued with this culture of progressive politics, of cheekiness and independence that's very much part of Port Adelaide. We're connecting this community with an outward-looking perspective around experimental practice and the value of art and culture both nationally and globally. What Vitalstatistix can offer is this base of experimental artistic work, a hub for developing experimental practice that sits outside of a CBD, that sits outside of the eastern states, but is very much connected with these national conversations.
Okay, so this is the theatre Vitalstatistix. The Vitalstatistix is housed in this 100-year-old Waterside Workers Federation Hall out in Port Adelaide. And it has a very important background, and it's been a site of cultural democracy, working class gatherings, sort of culture and working life for 100 years. So that's where the work takes place. So my story, the way I came to this project and this place. So in 2020, when I moved to Adelaide from Melbourne, it was the middle of COVID, and I moved to a new city, and I didn't really know anyone, but I was very, I was just thinking when I moved to this place, how am I going to make work in a place where I don't really have any connections or relationships, and I have to start again. So I was really open to meeting people and finding stories and really thinking about, like, what is my practice in a place that I don't know? And, how do I use my practice, my documentary practice, to also form relationships with people in a new city? So I went out to an event at Vitalstatistix, and I went on a walking tour around the port, and I learned a lot of information and a lot about the history, a lot about the Aboriginal history, the working class history, and the radical history of this area and this place. So around the same time as I moved to Adelaide, a friend of mine introduced me to her friend Ollie. So Ollie was one of the co-founders of this theatre called Vitalstatistix. So we started to spend time together, and she would tell me the stories about the theatre. So the theatre was formed in 1984, and it was formed by 3 lesbians who kept their identities secret at the time, because they used to do work in schools, and they would make theatre shows and travel them around the country, really, and perform in places like, they'd go to, mines and prisons and schools, performing their kind of educational sort of radical feminist theatre, but sort of all the while by pretending, that they weren't lesbian. So I became very interested in the stories that she would tell me about being on the road, going on these tours for months at a time, and performing for men in a mine and men in a prison, and trying to educate them about sort of sexual politics and issues that affected women. So I found this very interesting, and so I started to really think about, maybe there could be a project about the theatre, about these women who started this company. So the importance of place, this hall is very important to the story as the home of the theatre, and it's also got this really, rich history. So I became very interested in, just thinking about what kind of documentary can I make that is about the hall and is about the people and is about the history, and what kind of stories can I tell, and how could I present it in a way that would be, I guess, sort of situated in the place as well, so that, because this place is, such an important character. So these are just some old photos of the theatre, inside of the theatre. So it's been through, many upgrades since it was originally built, sort of in some disrepairs, and then sort of painted. And then this is when the theatre moved to the theatre moved there in about 1989, and they've occupied it ever since. So I was really interested in this idea of place, and really thinking about Doreen Massey's work, who's a geographer, and she talks about this idea of sort of the relations, embedded in this material practice, which have to be carried out. Always this process of being made. It's never finished, never closed. So this place is never finished. It's always ongoing. It's always being reimagined as it's used in relation to the people that occupy it. And she has this idea of the stories so far. So place has really composed of everything that's happened there in the stories so far. So I was very interested in these ideas around there's a strange noise there. So it's like somebody's eating or anyway.
I fixed it. I think I've muted everyone else.
Okay, there's a crackling going on. So this is all sort of part of my research project and part of my research process, sort of listening and sort of being in place and exploring these stories, not really sure what the project was, but having these, these interests around, everything that I was hearing and starting to look at the archives as well. Something else that happens in this hall is the choir that meets every Monday for been going for 20 years now, called Born on Monday Choir. So this became a really important part of the project too, because I started to go to the choir and just thinking about how I could work with the choir as part of the project as well. So I'm just going to play a little clip of the project. The other way. So the choir is really interesting because it's a community choir. Anyone can join the choir. The choir leader, Ella, sort of runs it with her dad, who plays the piano accordion. There's people of all different backgrounds and ages, different demographics, lots of activists, lots of, community-minded people. And I became really interested in the choir as this, really central part of the project because of the diversity of people involved. And I was just thinking, how can we, that can be part of this project as well. So I was very interested in doing something with the archives. So the three co-founders here, Margie, Roxy and Ollie, formed their own archives, and they're held in the theatre. And the three of them ran the theatre from 1984 to 1992. And then they started to go off in different directions and do their own thing. So I really wanted to contain the project because the history of this theatre had been going for 40 years, and I couldn't really tell the whole history of the theatre. So I just wanted to contain it to a particular time period. So this is a way to narrow it down. And some of the I started to think about some of the the questions, some of my documentary questions around the process, around working with histories, around working with archives, around thinking about sort of feminist practices. And so some of the questions that I came up in the beginning to help guide the project were, what are the responsibilities to the archive and history? So, of course, working in documentary and working with archives, there's always a certain fidelity or a kind of responsibility to the material you're working with and to those histories. How does my creative interpretation or representation deal with the above? So what creative decisions am I making? What are the stories that I think are interesting or important to tell? What are the kinds of questions and stories that my participants might have? What might the audience be interested in? Because this is a work that is going to be for an audience. What do the audience want from this project as well? So there's a whole lot of different contingencies there that help to guide some of the decisions I made. Also, this idea of not just telling a history about something that happened. What is the relevance of their work now? What is, what can the archives and the history say to the present, or what can we bring, bring from the past into the present? What kind of practices are still relevant? And this quote from Alex Martinez-Rowe, who's a an Australian artist. What practices and methods from the past can be recuperated in order to tell multi-generational stories, to create solidarity with who came before us and those who come after. So, it's very much, a feminist practice, talking about different generations of feminism. Also thinking about some of the practices that I think are really interesting and relevant now, and just, trying to, disrupt this idea that, sort of progress is linear and, the future is always more interesting than the past, because I think there are a lot of really interesting collective practices from the past and from these women that they used in the theatre back then that I think, I really wanted to bring into the present as well. And this idea of what kind of stories can contribute to a collective narrative, a community of careful listeners. So just having just really sort of foregrounding practices of listening as a collective act. So I started to look at the archives and go through all the material, and this is an era of archiving where there were so many interesting things, like just people, like receipts or documents or handwritten notes, or sort of just these photos that weren't production images, but they were just snapshots of people, spending time together. So all of this ephemera and sort of non-canonical kind of material in the archives, I became very interested in. And then I was just thinking about, what can I do, with this material? So I talked to my friend is a sort of does research into archives. So this is a little clip of us having a conversation around archive fever and, sort of working with archives.
But yeah, I'm interested in that, the way you're describing that first day of kind of, sort of like madly looking for what will be useful. Because I think that's, I don't know, it's like that's with the Derrida stuff of archive fever, which is not quite, it's like that, what is it, mal d'archive, where it could also be like what's mal's like, there could also be archive sickness, or on malda, which is like to be in want, like so on mal d'archive, to be in need of an archive. So it's like you're needing something in there. You never quite get to the body, like to the main thing. And I think it's the same in an archive. You never quite find the exact thing you're looking for. It's always just kind of like we're always looking for evidence of something or completeness in an archive, like for the thing to arrive kind of fully formed, but it never does. It's always just sort of bits and pieces, because it is like documentary evidence, like, it's usually written materials. There's always bits missing, and it's so it's like, so Derrida's like describes it, I guess in that structure, it's always like a preamble or a forward, and then you get to the end of the archive and you haven't quite found the thing.
All right, so I think, I was really interested in just this idea of first going into the archive and just that kind of real excitement of what I'd found, but then like each time revisiting it, sort of finding other things, also sort of not finding things, or just that the slipperiness of the archive and what is the archive, and what's in there, what does it tell us, and so many gaps. And I think also around this time, if we're looking at the 80s, we're looking at sort of feminist, lesbian theatre, radical theatre, there isn't a lot of documentation there. There's hardly any audio-visual material. There's just, some photos, and, a lot of people have sort of photos at home. The more precious personal photos are kept at home. They're not in the archive. It's sort of bits and pieces. But, I was sort of interested in what was there and what was not there. So the next step for me was, I thought, like I always begin a project by doing interviews, even if I don't want to use them. I always think that's a really good place to start, because there's some kind of, I don't know, I guess like an accepted norm of documentary with the interview as a way to have an encounter and to, have a conversation, and also to, collect material or to sort of hear stories. So I organised a day to interview the three of them, in the hall. So the three of them came in. So, I mean, they're still friends, actually. The bottom two are a couple. They've been together for, nearly 40 years, or 40 years, I guess, over 40 years. So the three of them came in and I interviewed them each individually, asking more or less the same questions, just about the history and about memories, and also questions about how they work together, and conflict, and it's quite intense sort of working, three people running a theatre company, and so there were lots of different stories, but they're still really good friends. But then I also organized, after I did the individual interviews, I organized together with them. We chose 4 of the productions that they had sort of written and produced during their time together, and we got the archives out and we set them up on these these benches or these sort of platforms in the theatre, and they brought in some images. So we created these archival little pods around the theatre, and then filmed them sort of coming to the archive and actually pulling material out and sort of talking about it. So using this kind of photo elicitation technique to prompt their stories, prompt their memories, and I think it was really interesting to see the three of them together compared to interviewing them individually, like how they all responded together with the archive. So this is a short clip from that.
This was our first one of our first paid gigs.
Yes,
1984.
yeah. And the school offered to make the costumes and made that really, really tight so his legs couldn't move. Remember?
No, it's down around my knees.
And she couldn't get up on the stage. And then after the show, little handbag, and I found her trapped in the corner with all these boys like going, hick, hick. And it's a thing that people do to clowns.
Yeah, I know.
They kick the shit out of them.
I know. I was a clown once with a pillow in front of me. I was called Tongue. And kicked because
Yeah.
Just kick the shit out of them.
Did it happen when you
And
were
there's Margie on the stilts. And then I'm an orange.
But
I'm
everyone
a
thought-
juicy orange called vitamin C.
that's right, it was about fruit.
Juicy and fresh.
Yeah, it was
and I was born
healthy
on
food?
Okay, so that was one of the first sort of pieces that I used, the three of them sort of talking about the beginnings of their sort of the theatre project. So I think, this is really interesting about these, trying to fill the gaps or using these conversations to fill in the gaps around that's what's missing in the archive. So these all these conversations and all these, elements of sort of the everyday interactions that are often missing in the archives. So I also felt like, sort of filming them in conversation gave a real, sense of animation to their relationship, and, animated the archives through interacting with it as well. So with these sort of film material, I created 15 short pieces of around 2 or 3 minutes. And then in July 2023, I did a creative development. So this is something I learnt from working in the the theatre for the first time, that they have a whole different way of, I guess, sort of different set of processes they use to develop work. So they have these sort of intense periods of creative development. So you might go to the theatre and work with people collaboratively and talk about ideas. So this was quite a unnatural experience for me, and mostly I went into the theatre with my laptop and sort of sat there by myself, so it wasn't the same kind of experience. But I decided that I would this was sort of a 2-week period, and then we had a work in progress showing with an audience. So I also decided, because I had been making these films, that I also wanted to work with some artists and theatre makers who could bring the archives to life. So, have some performative elements in the show. So I commissioned 4 artists, so I had some funding from the Arts Council in South Australia. So I had 4 artists. I commissioned 4 artists to come in and look at the archives and then make a performative piece that responds to the archive to perform at this event. So they had about up to 7 minutes each. So 4 women and they all had long histories with this theatre, and that they were theatre makers or artists or writers, activists. So the brief to the artists was to draw in the archives and to create something that could be performed. So when I structured the event, so I had 2 events over a Friday and Saturday night, went for about an hour each. So I had filmed sequences, and then sort of in between there were these performative elements from the artists. So my film components were documentary, and they represented the stories and some of the history. And the commission artists had more license to interpret the archive. So I guess I was sort of, making quite faithful documentary pieces, and then they had sort of the liberty to create something that just responded in a more free way to the archives, that didn't necessarily have to talk about the history, but they could talk about their own experience as well. So what emerged of interest through their archival research was the methodology. So the 3 co-founders used to create plays, and they used to do research groups, focus groups, where women would come together and they would have breakfasts and sort of morning teas, and they would use these focus groups to collect material from the women just to see what issues were important to them. So it was a little bit like consciousness raising groups. Also this idea of hospitality was really important. So back in the 80s when the theatre started, they were always creating a hospitable space. There was always, tea and cake and, sort of really taking care of people at the theatre as well. So all of these were very interesting to the artists, and they wanted to create these kind of elements for the productions. So after the 2-week development, I had 2 work in progresses. There's just some images there. This is how the hall was set up. So I had the screen there with the films projected. So the films would play for about sort of 5 to 7 minutes. So lots of different sequences, and then it would alternate with a performance on the stage there, and people sort of sat around these small tables in a cabaret style seating. So just another one of the only videos that I found in the archive was a video creation from a play that they did. So I wanted to include this. So this is a clip of that one.
Like my badge, sexual harassment, I want some. Now, I don't suppose a lot of you know what sexual harassment is. So, seeing I'm an expert, I'll tell you all about it.
This is Meryl Bowman, 35, mother of 2, separated, no current boyfriend. I like her. The lads give her a hard time, so she comes in early to avoid them. She's photocopying the big boss's morning reports.
Well, here we are again, just you and me. Now, I want to do this fast, so don't do anything wrong, okay?
Would I do that? Here we go, Meryl.
Hi, how's she going today?
Oh, no. Here comes 37, father of 3, married, $35,000 a year. Nicknamed the office octopus. Why can't he leave her alone?
Oh, it's going fine. Just have to treat these machines delicately, you know.
Know what you mean. Can't have you jamming up the office equipment like you did yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that.
As I seem to recall, it wasn't me who jammed it up.
Oh, come. I won't let anyone know that You're just not competent enough to use the machine. Your secret is safe with me. My turn.
No, actually, I still have 80 copies of this and 40 of this and 35 of those.
Well, you don't mind if I flip in between your reams, do you?
Yeah. Well, we had the discussions. We made a DVD that got sold to schools. We sold quite a few.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
we started a bank account for the profits. Remember?
Were there any?
No.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so Anne, I won't say her surname, who's female, says, I think it's when someone touches you and you don't want them to.
She got
Who, if it was a friend, I'd stick by them and I would try to encourage them to tell a parent, like a mother, for example. If it was me, I would tell my mother or father so they could put a stop to it.
very good.
Isn't
She
it?
learned what we were talking about.
I wonder.
So that gives a sense of the kind of shows they did. They used, comedy and, sort of community theatre. They had a lot of costumes that somebody had made, they were quite sort of these big, elaborate kind of costumes that you would sort of climb inside of, like the photocopier. But the whole purpose was really around education, and they would perform and then they would hold discussions about the issues, and then they would get, give a questionnaire or get feedback and get audience comments. So, that was sort of the gist of a lot of their, beginning sort of theatre. So also in this work in progress, I had Mish, who is a performance artist, and she was really interested. She, got a long history with the theatre, but she's got her own practice and was very interested just in one photograph. So she created a kind of lecture performance that she, she performed. So she was really interested in this idea of sort of the utopianism of artist collectives.
Kim sends me a text after our meeting. Great to chat. She invites me to a Google Drive and I start scrolling through pictures. I flick through a few images of past shows, nice retro fonts. There are scripts too, but I want to know, what was it like to be there? What was it like for them all those years ago? In 1966, the dancer and choreographer Yvonne Rainer wrote that dance is hard to see. She was speaking about how elusive dance is and how it's ephemeral, it disappears in the live moment. 50 years later, the same question kind of persists. I find some other photos. Here, someone dancing at a party. There, two people chatting. Okay, this is the history that I want. I'll describe one. If you're the camera person, you're out the front of this building on the street. It's Niles Street, but it's a little different decades ago. Maybe you're a little bit younger. Maybe you had a few less crinkles around your eyes. Maybe you weren't even born yet, but you were in your previous body. Maybe that time you were taller or you had dark hair. You've got a camera in your hand. It only functions as a camera. It's weird. It can't check your email. In fact, you don't even have email. You might not even have a computer at work, and you definitely don't have one at home. As for your outfit today, it's safe to say you're wearing overalls. So you're out the front, you're in the entryway.
Okay, so that's just a bit of an idea of the different performances in between the films. So after I did those events, again, this is another interesting thing about, I guess, making a theatre that has a lot of different developments over a period of time. I had the film work and I had these performances, but it did feel like a complete event, and it felt, like that was it. I'd sort of done that work. I didn't really know what else to do with that particular work, especially around the film. And also because the theatre is such an important space. And, I think with theatre, it's so much about bodies moving in space. And I felt like if I just go back to that, this image, I had the screen there. So people were sitting there and they were, looking at the films on the screen, and then they were looking at people on the stage who were mainly talking. It's like, oh, there's so much talking, and then there's people looking at the screen, and it sort of felt like, I wasn't really doing enough in the space. Like the space, holds so much, and it holds so much history and memories. But here we are just looking at a screen and looking at people talking, and I just thought, how can I shift this work so it's less about looking at people on a screen and there that sort of separation, that is so, like such a big part of filmmaking, really. But, because we're in the theatre, like how can I actually, make it more of an embodied space? So at the beginning of this year, in January, we did another creative development. So, meanwhile, there was a change of leadership at the theatre and things, sort of, I don't know, was this project going to happen? I didn't get some funding, and then I applied again and I did get some funding. And anyway, so the project was still going. It was going to happen. So we did another creative development in 2025. And by this time I had, a lot more money. I was able to bring on more collaborators. So I had at the back of the image there is Ella, who's the choir leader. So I had money to pay her and to pay all the choir members to be part of this, to pay a composer and sound designer, a dramaturg, a sort of lighting venue designer, and a book designer. So I had sort of, enough money to pay these people, these really great people, to collaborate with. So we had a production or a sort of creative development, and really thought about, what the work could be. And by then I really decided that I didn't want to have film in it at all. I wanted it just to be an audio work in the theatre, with a book and lighting and sort of set design. So removing the film element altogether, because I actually didn't want people to be just looking at something flat in this theatre. So by then I was also thinking about some more research questions. And some of the feedback, or after the first event, one of the, the women who'd been around at that time, she sent me a message. She's saying, yeah, it was great, but, like it wasn't just these three women, there were so many people. There was, it was a big network of people that made work and that made this happen. And I really thought about that. It's like, yeah, it's not just three women, it's actually a network of women. But how do I, what is the aesthetic of a network? How do I represent a network? And also just thinking about, what kind of strategies can I bring from theatre and documentary to tell these histories that make them feel present? They're not just sort of historical sort of recounting of memories from the past, because that's sort of, not really one of my less favorite genres of documentary, this sort of telling stories from the past, with a range of voices. This idea of like embodying the documentary audience, embodying the archive. So how do people, I guess, be a bit more present and sort of be using other senses in this space as well? Just this idea of impact too, because, to a lot of people, this story or this project was really important, because it was really telling stories that don't usually get told, which are about lesbian women of a certain age. So I think, there was a certain responsibility to audiences and to the community as well. And just this idea, what kind of strategies could I use so the audience were not only looking outwards, but also inwards. So not just looking, I'm not just telling a story where they're looking at something happening. They're actually being invited to reflect on their own lives and their own decisions, their own, sort of artistic labor, their own relationship to other people, to ideas of a collective, and so on. So, these things were all kind of guiding the next phase of the project. So as I sort of moved through the production, or through the development week, some of these themes emerged. So this idea of collectives, I was really interested in different collectives and the individual. Rivers, because the theatre is sort of located on a river, and rivers became a very important theme, sort of just trying to capture a sense of the environment as well and what was sort of, you know, around that area. Networks, and also this, you know, it's the question of differences and a plurality of difference. I also wanted to create an audio piece. So it was going to be a listening experience through headphones. And the elements that went into the audio piece were the interviews. So not just with the three women, I interviewed some other people that were really important to the theatre or to that area. Conversation, sound design, music, field recordings, and then also the choir. I also wanted to, so it'd be a book and then an audio piece, and then there would be a book that the audience would get with images from the archives. So I really wanted to have the design to be non-hierarchical. So it wasn't like sort of things were, yeah, this was my brief to the book designer, like a non-hierarchical book. So, you know, there was no text in there. It was all images and sort of using this theme of rivers and creating the images sort of like a sort of rivers through it. I wanted to use archival images, but not the, you know, none of the production photos, more of those snapshots. I wanted to have images of the river. It had the list of all the productions from over 40 years, an image index. I'm actually going to just grab the book here because I've got it. So this was the, so with the project, it came along with this book. So this is the book that was provided with the audio that people would look at the images. So instead of looking at a screen, they would be looking at a book, so in a more intimate relationship with the work. So another element was lighting, the lighting design, sort of cushions and seating, and then the choir. So I'm going to just, I'll show you a few images from the work. So this is the choir again. So, wait, I'll just go back. So another element was there was a song composed for the choir to sing. So throughout, for about 4 months, the choir learnt a song composed by my sound designer and composer. So sung in 3 parts. And the song was composed from all of the audience comments that were collected in the archives, and they were used to create a song. So throughout, over about 3 months, they learnt the song. I recorded them learning the song. That audio became part of the audioscape, and then at the end of the performance, the choir came out and sang the song. So it's quite complicated. There's so many different aspects to this work, so it's a little bit complicated to talk about. So the final work was performed in May in 2025, so just 6 months ago, I guess. And it was part of the History Festival. And that's sort of the ticketing information. So that's in the background is an installation shot of the theatre setup. So something else, I'll come back to that, but I was really thinking about, you know, just this idea of like, how can I use the archives more? And so I had this idea of creating these giant cushions. So I had these, the archival images, like some of the comments and newspaper cuttings sort of printed onto fabric that then created these giant cushions that people sat on. And also I was really, you know, some of my research and background is around sound and and listening and, you know, just, I guess, sort of shifting away from the primacy of the visual and really thinking about what sound can do and sort of connecting people. So, you know, really like this quote by Brandon LaBelle about sound is promiscuous. It exists as a network that teaches us how to belong, to find place, as well as how not to belong, to drift, to be out of place and still to search for new connection, for proximity. Auditory knowledge is non-dualistic. It's based on empathy and divergence, allowing for careful understanding and deep involvement in the present while connecting to the dynamics of mediation, displacement, and virtuality. So I was really interested in this idea of, you know, the audio being a way to connect people in a space, but also have an individual experience. So this is a few more sort of images. So the final work was performed over, there were 5 performances, and it was only quite a small audience because of the technology and the headphones. So there are only about 35 people that could come into each performance. So people got their headphones, they came into the space, and then they were invited to, you know, look around, and people were very interested in reading the cushions and the material, and then have a seat, and then after about sort of 5 minutes or so, they were asked to open one of these boxes and take out a book like that. And then throughout the event, so sometimes the audio would just sort of you know, drift, and there would be sound design, and then sometimes people were asked to open to a certain page, and then they would look at the images that corresponded with the actual stories and sort of interviews and material from that. So I'll just show a few more images. It was quite sort of a I don't know, a cozy, intimate space, and the lighting shifted throughout. Sometimes you know, the lighting would dim when you know, it was just asking people to kind of you know, put the book aside or not focus on the book so much and actually just listen to some stories or interview, or, you know, the sound of the water. I also used a lot of recordings that were taken inside, you know, with a hydrophone sort of inside the river, and sort of there's these little crackling shrimp that live in there. So there was a whole lot of different sound designs as well. So this, yeah, this is a few more. I'm just going to play now a piece here. So just going back to the image, the video I played before about a touchy subject, talking about sexual harassment. So I just want to play a little piece from the audio here, just thinking about taking that original material, but then creating it for the audio piece, and what changed as I did that.
I don't know, what was the
Do you love your work? Does your work love you? Did you find your calling early in life? Did you find your calling late? Did you ever find your calling? Do you give a fuck about callings? Turn to page 46. Page 46. Flip through from there to page 58.
Like my badge, sexual harassment, I want some. Now, I don't suppose a lot of you know what sexual harassment is. So, seeing I'm an expert, I'll tell you all about it. Oh, look, sexual harassment policy. There was a sexual harassment conference. Look, here's the script.
Look at that. Grievance procedure, 1987. What's changed? Anyway.
Now,
March. So
Oh, there's all the audience notes.
this is audience feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we had the discussions. We made a DVD that got sold to schools. We sold quite a few.
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
we started a bank account for the profits. Remember?
were there any?
No.
No.
This is Meryl Bowman, 35, mother of 2, separated, no current boyfriend. I like her. The lads give her a hard time, so she comes in early to avoid them. She's photocopying the big boss's morning reports.
Well, here we are again, just you and me. Now, I want to do this fast, so don't do anything wrong, okay?
Would I do that? Here we go, Meryl.
Hi. How's she going today?
Oh, no. Here comes 37, father of 3, married, $35,000 a year. Nicknamed the octopus. Why can't he leave her alone?
Oh, it's going fine. Just have to treat these machines delicately, you know.
Know what you mean. Can't have you jamming up the office equipment like you did yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that.
As I seem to recall, it wasn't me who jammed it up.
Oh, come. I won't let anyone know that you're just not competent enough to use the machine. Your secret is safe with me. My turn.
No, actually, I still have 80 copies of this and 40 of this and 35 of those.
Well, you don't mind if I flip in between your reams, do you? We could have done it forever.
It was a big success.
I know. I thought that we
Especially
were going
now.
to end sexual harassment.
With
I
the
really did. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
so marvellous.
Well,
No, didn't you
yeah,
think so?
yeah.
You thought there'd be enough
Because it was
error,
about education, and then
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
thought it would stop.
and it didn't, and it just got worse.
Yeah.
Mind you, there's a whole, different movement now. So
Yeah, but it's how many years
You're
is
right.
it? 30 years since we did it?
I thought that we
Especially
were going to
now.
end sexual harassment.
Take a closer look at page 55. Now look at 54. And back to 55. What's on your checklist?
Out together, in together, step 1, 2, 3, turn, out together, in together, 1, 2, 3.
Would you like to dance? With a partner or by yourself? Do you know the steps?
3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Out together, in together, 1, 2, 3. Turn out together, in together, 1, 2, 3. Step, kick, turn your girl around and waltz with me. 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. And so it would repeat.
All right, so that was just, I gave that as an example to show how I took the original film interview material and then put it into the sort of listening context that worked with the book. So in the beginning and throughout, you can hear the choir sort of, warming up and doing some different exercises. Then you have the piece that was originally recorded in the interviews. And something else that I use throughout the piece is this recurring question. So questions to try and get the audience to really think about their own life, think about themselves in relation to, some of the themes and some of the stories, and also to instruct the audience to open to various pages and look at different things. So just to create that relationship between the audio and the book and to engage the audience. So there's somebody in situ. Throughout also there was lighting was used in different ways. There's this board in the hall, the club championship. So the lighting was also used so people could direct their attention to various aspects of the hall as well. There was also a performer. So this is Emma, whose voice you heard before asking the question. So she was she was kind of like the caretaker as well, caretaker of the space. If anyone had any problems, with their headphones or other things, she would attend to them. She was also, doing some gentle maintenance on the hall, like a little bit of painting, and also sort of writing questions. So throughout, she wrote questions for the audience and then gave them. Everyone got a question in envelope at the end as a kind of gift to take with them. There's just a few more installation shots. And this is the choir. So the choir performed, some people performed at every performance, some people just performed at one or two. So it was really up to people which, how much they wanted to participate in the, in the performances. And then afterwards there was soup, and everyone ate soup. This is just a little clip that I recorded of the rehearsal of the song. Okay, and that's why I called the talk "Your Collective Energy is Stunning," because that was one of the comments that was left on the audience feedback in the 80s, which we all really liked. So it was a beautiful line. And I just want to finish on this. I guess a couple of outcomes from this work is there is this book, and the book is was sort of designed so people could go to the theatre show, but a lot of people can't go to a theatre show in a when there's only a limited amount of audience, and all of the performance, it's all sold out before it even opens. So not many people got to see it, but you can get the book. You can buy the book through the website of the theatre, and it comes with a QR code, so you can listen to the audio while doing the book at home. So I guess that's one sort of non-traditional research output for that. And then I also wrote a chapter for this book, Women in Global Documentary. And so that was really after the first iteration of the work. So that reflects on that, sort of using feminist and queer theory. And then a recent article with some colleague friends about audiences and trying to create work for audiences, or thinking about the audience in the work. So yeah, that's it pretty much.
What a fascinating project.
Really,
no, really, I'm just
lots of different aspects. So it's like, I probably missed a few.
Yeah, no, it really does. I have pages of notes here as we're speaking. It's genuinely fascinating. It's projects like this always amaze me because, and we had another colleague from our university who works with ceramics, which also was talking about a project that lasted, in his case, 7 years. And I think what I find absolutely fascinating about work like that, like in this case, you just started with this idea, well, I just moved to a new city and I want to see this place. And then we end up with a whole range of just absolutely fascinating, processes, but and outputs and insights and just really incredible. And I have lots of questions. I don't know which one I should start with, but
should I stop sharing, or
perhaps
so we can leave it on that, or
no, maybe you can stop sharing so we can actually see more of you for if that's okay. So, and I really love the final I don't even know what word to use. Like in my notes, I called it performance/exhibition/workshop, because I don't know if there's an easy way to, which is brilliant because did you have a name to describe it? Did you call it installation?
It's not really an installation. It's more like a sort of documentary theatre performance. Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And it's interesting now. Because actually, in 2027, it's 100 years. The hall is 100 years old. So we're talking about restaging the work. I mean, it was it was a very resource intensive project because you know the tech you know the choir, you know, so many different people you know had to be there to run this project or these performances smoothly. So we're talking about restaging it as more of an installation where you come in and you at a set time and you just sort of there's no choir or there's you know maybe you can like come in and just do the work in the setup. So it's
and I presume like from you know you still, just to use research terms, you were still collecting some data as part of that. So potentially I wouldn't be surprised if I speak to you in a couple of months and you tell me, well, actually there's the next stage for that, you know, to kind of build on that, because it seems this is how this project developed. Like I don't presume that when you went to that theater for the first time you had your research questions and funding in place. You just went there and started discovering, and it probably was not even part of, correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I'm assuming too much here, but I thought like only after you started realizing the richness of the archives and what's going on with the community and the choir and so on and so forth, this is where you probably started looking into possibilities of this being an art project in the first place and a research project following. Am I correct to say that?
I mean, it really started when Ollie said, oh, we went through, you know, we were putting together our archives and we were remembering the stories, and it's like, and you know, she's like, oh, and you know, we said, oh, somebody should be filming this. And it's like, well, maybe I can.
That's so nice. And yet you did something completely different. So it was just quite interesting. I also love the idea that, because, you know, like when you think about the list of your final work, so you have audio, which normally is something which will be part of a film. You have visuals which sit in your book, so you have your film split in two different, you know, if I wanted to look for you know, because as a filmmaker you would just make a film, but you kind of you know,
sort of like it's, and then with the audience kind of in between, really, you know, the audience as a conduit between sort of the visuals and the audio. So I guess it is sort of traversing through the body and then sort of sitting in the cushions that are kind of the archives. And
I think it's such a fascinating way of thinking about audiences, you know, this kind of immersion with the material you're dealing with, because, and I don't want to banalize contemporary film reception practices, but we all know how we all consume films most of the time. It will be on small screens in between many different things, and you obviously take it away from you kind of remove this possibility by creating this kind of really immersive, let's call it installation for the sake of the conversation. Just really interesting. It makes me think how much potential there is in really rethinking the way of working, not only with audiences but archives, but also just about anything, really, like how many different ways we can explore in just getting people interested in. And I think the lighting was also quite fascinating, because I don't know if you could maybe talk. I'm rambling. I normally have very clear questions, but I'm just really you know, I just found it so interesting. And so can I just actually ask a question which is a bit more coherent? So when you said you eventually got funding from Arts Council and managed the commission for artists, were they the ones who were designing the cushions and lighting, or what is it they did specifically?
The artists, the people I paid. So I had a composer sound designer who composed that song for the choir, and she you know, came in a few times. She lives in Victoria. She lives in another state, but she works in Adelaide a lot. And also she, I would, you know, she's also a cellist, so she put in some cello music, and she worked with a lot of the interviews, and I did some binaural sound recordings in the hall of footsteps around. So then that was part, so you could hear. It was like, you know, people walking around, you know, that was actually one of the things most people commented on, was like, oh, it just sounded like the footsteps. Somebody was walking next to me, because, you know, that binaural is just like, oh, they're walking, you know. So these recordings and all the choir recordings, warming up, doing different things. She took some materials from, there was another rehearsal video from the 80s. So she took all of this material and then just created these soundscapes. And I mean, she's an incredible collaborator, and it was just like, she would just like, yeah, really on the same wavelength. And after she'd do a few things, and they're like, yeah, that, and then she'd go, okay. And then once she sort of got my aesthetic, just everything she did was just, you know, like amazing. And then I did I sort of did the edits of the piece, and then she kind of did all the sound design in there. So then I had so a friend of mine who is a designer, so she did the book design. And so the book is and so all of the productions are listed here. And then there's some also, you know, there's a few, like, I mean, those zine images are contemporary, so there's a few contemporary images here. So we talked a lot about that's sort of the two, you know, different.
The fact that there's no text there, and I really love it. I love that you extracted text to the cushions, which it's just blew my mind really.
Well, the text is sort of like, oh, this is like a report. So, you know, and I mean, they've got all these binders of like a whole research report on every production and all of the places they visited, and so. Yeah, so and just, you know, these kind of images that, you know, they're not production images, they're just kind of, you know, like letters from somebody who runs, you know, the jail. And then I had a dramaturg, and I only paid her a little bit. She's a full-time academic, so she didn't really, you know, she said, don't worry about me. I had the performer, Emma, who did the voice and, you know, was there sort of to help guide people, the choir leader, and then honorarium for the choir people for each performance. And then the lighting designer and sort of, like the venue designer the cushions were my idea, but she sort of had them made and did the lighting.
It's quite fascinating. I think my dog has just woken up. I'm sorry. So I'm aware that there's some people in the room, and I know they will probably be wanting to ask questions, but I just wanted to ask one more thing about, you know, it was just really incredible to see that video they recorded, that you shared, the one with the photocopier, the kind of, because it was obviously both really, you know, serious, but at the same time humorous, and I was just quite impressed at that, you know, on the content. It was just really so good. And I also loved, you could feel that it was made some time ago. You felt it smelled of 80s as well, which I absolutely love.
That humor as well, kind of like exaggerated.
I know.
Yeah, and the cushions were really, you know, those costumes, and, you know, there were other ones where there's big cakes, you know, like big sort of padded cake costumes. And, you know, like when I was thinking about the venue, it's just like, you know, I don't know, there was something in the project you know, when I was doing the second development, and I was just like, oh, my style of documentary is like, you know, it's not fun really. It's like a bit serious, and, you know, but, you know, like they had such a sense of humor and fun. It's like, I need to bring, you know, a bit more fun to this project. Like something needs to be fun, or something needs to kind of resonate in the aesthetic with, you know, with their aesthetic. You know, so I was worried about that. And then I just thought about the cushions, and like, you know, as a, I guess sort of, you know, reference to those costumes in the early days. It's just like, oh, people love the cushions. But
with that video we talked about, because obviously, you know, the primarily worked within, you know, live performance, I presume, being a theatre. So do you know if there was more of those videos made in the 80s, or was it just one-off almost?
It was just one video, because they had some money, because that was a really successful production. They had some money to turn it into a video so that could be sold. Oh, they mentioned that, you know, they started a bank account, but and sell it to sort of, you know, community colleges and high schools, so it could be a training video against, you know, sexual harassment in the workplace,
which is fascinating in itself, because you think about, like, this is not what you think about when you think a training video, and it's just like,
no, it's like an online. It's an online training module.
It's exactly. It's, and you know, we don't necessarily have a sense of humor with this kind of videos, especially if you talk about something so important and heavy, like, you know, sexual harassment. So is the space, what's happening in the theatre at the moment? Are they still just continuing making more productions? Obviously, I know that it's probably led by other people by now, as you because they finished in the 90s, but
a new artistic director took over last year. Yeah, it's still, I mean, it's like experimental performance and sort of experimental performance and theatre. It's still really vibrant. They have national arts funding. So it's still really a lot. It's pretty amazing that a theatre has a physical space for one, and that it's existed for 40 years.
I know.
It's pretty rare,
Fascinating.
Yeah.
I think Lee Jane is trying to gently suggest I should stop hijacking it. So if you want to unmute yourself, Lee Jane, and ask a question, that would be great.
Oh no, not at all. Thanks. Thanks for that, Kim. It was really, really fascinating and interesting. And I might go on a bit of a ramble, a bit like there's a question. I've got the question, but the preamble is just, I thought this, being a filmmaker myself and making work that kind of, I want audiences to have more of a connection, but also not just consume and go, oh yeah, that was fine, and walk away. It's provocative stuff. I mean, I work in fiction, but I even took a picture of your screenshot of the space and the screen and the seating, because I've been thinking a lot about how we need to probably, as makers, get more involved with that space and how we show our films. And that, what I want as a director for my films is it to provoke a conversation. And cinema doesn't necessarily do that these days. So in some sense, I've got to try and figure out how I initiate or frame that, or kind of not force an audience, but allow the audience that space to do it. But what I did wonder, and I think you've just sort of touched on it there, was the fact that this place has been going, this theatre, and then that I love that old image of the theatre, that it was the water. What was it again? The waterworks.
It's the Waterside Workers Hall, and they were so they kind of contributed to the building, like their wages contributed, and it was also a really important space for Aboriginal families and white families could come together and have dances, and
I love that.
So it's
I like that, a sense of history and a sense of place. And I suppose my question then becomes, how important do you think that sense of place is, rooted in a building? For me, not always in audiences are interested, but I think it's really important, the history of that place. How important do you think that is?
For this work, or generally?
For that work, for that work, and therefore,
I mean, it's so specific. I mean, it's like, we kept talking about, it's like, how could this work be performed anywhere else? I mean, the stories, I mean, the themes are really universal, and people are always watching films that are about something very specific. So it's, but I think in theatre or this project, it's like, could people find their way into the project if they didn't know the organization or the theatre or something, or the place, but also because there's a lot about, the work is so situated in place, and the audio and, the stories are from that place. It's really hard to imagine that being performed somewhere else. Although I did, my friend bought a book and she did it in Melbourne, and she's never been to this theatre, and she said it, she said it worked. She said it, like it still worked. The project still worked without being in the place, because there's so many, I mean, this book there are a lot of photos in the building, and some of them, so, it could work, but it is really, the place is important. But, I think a lot about exhibition, and, I also run screenings and here, and I try to do create other events with the screenings. So we have the screening and maybe, commission an essay and we do a talk, or, just did some queer screenings with some colleagues, and we had after the screenings, we'd have, an activity, and we did a sort of sing along and a bingo, and, they made zines, so it was all part of the screening, sort of culture. Because I just think, it's hard to, people aren't necessarily just going to come and have a conversation after a film unless you kind of frame it in a way to, facilitate that.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Yeah, and this project was, afterwards, there was soup. So everyone sort of stuck around and had soup and bread and a drink, and so that was sort of like inbuilt to the experience as well. So it did create that space where people sort of stayed and talked about it. But it's interesting. Also, the last performance, I ran into somebody I know after the performances, and she said, she finished the performance and somebody next to her was crying, and she said, "Oh, I've just, I've realized I've kept, I've spent my whole life keeping people out, and I need to let people in," because the work ends with, what's in your archive, why do you keep what you keep, who will remember your work? And it is, so it's also about, artist labor and legacies and histories and what we make. And somebody, it, did have a really powerful effect on somebody, because they were just really thought about, who will remember my work? And it is, I think we all think about that.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you.
I have to say, I was quite jealous when I was looking at those photos that I couldn't be there and experience the performance. And I think you really managed, and this is quite incredible. Like, create is kind of, I think it's also because it responds to other senses, by what you said right now, someone crying and just thinking. I think it's not only the text or the line you said, but I think it's also just being there, sitting there. The cushions, the lighting, the audio, all of that together, because we engage other senses that you kind of you perceived, this message, if you like to call it like that. I think it's just really, really interesting.
And also because you are, there is that, of course, the headphones, so you're kind of in this space, and the book, but then and the lighting kind of holds people too, but then sometimes the lighting kind of, opens up, or there's a question is like, look around, who's in your collective. And so, I guess you are sort of very much always in this space in relation to other people, and sort of in relation to yourself and the stories and the history, but in relation to other people, and that proximity, and where you choose to sit, and how, whether you sit by yourself, you sit next to somebody, so that's a lot of that as well.
So the people who were in that space, because obviously you had a really nice arrangement for, I loved how that had to find the book in a box that just, that it wasn't just here you go, like you have to read it. But could they move around? So could they just drag their lines?
Because we talked a lot about so I want people to sort of move around, but it was always like, but if somebody doesn't have to move for a reason, they're not going to move. That was, so this is so interesting working with a dramaturg and like theatre people, because it's like they know what audience does. It's like, I just know that they go in there and sit down, but maybe people were able to move and kind of be in sort of configurations and in relation, but it's like, they won't move unless they have a reason. You can't just make people to move, otherwise people get annoyed. And so all of that audience behavior was really interesting. It's like, how will people be feel comfortable, and like what level should the light be so they can see the page numbers, and then so we had to send instructions to people to make sure they bring reading glasses if they need them, so they wouldn't be frustrated because they couldn't read a page number, or so there's so many elements to think about. Like, how far is the box away? Can they reach it? Will they? There's so many. There was so many facts, and a lot of people sat on. There was like kind of these old theatre seats where most people chose to sit, because a lot of people were a bit older, because they're kind of in the community and associated with this these stories and people, so they didn't want to get down on a cushion. So it's like, okay, well, how many seats, and like where will people sit? And yeah, so I mean, people could get up and move, but yeah, no one wanted to, because also the lighting was really, the lighting changed throughout as well, and sometimes, there were lots of these sort of river sounds, in the soundscape. So then the lights sort of became blue and sort of dimmed and sort of took people, it was really sort of, had a dramaturgy to the light structure as well.
Which is usually quite powerful as well in terms of how it affects people. Really nice. So I would love to, if you don't mind, go back to kind of the first question I started with, just because I also took a note, like how you were saying, which I loved, that, at the beginning you didn't know what was going to happen. Obviously, we never know with projects like that. And then at some point you said you applied for some funding, you didn't get it, and then you got it afterwards. So the question I wanted to ask you, because I'm trying to, this series was in the very first place created for PhD students and ECRs working with creative practice research of any kind and sort. And as we all know, the struggle usually is when you apply for some kind of funding, or you apply for a PhD or whatever, you need to know what you're gonna get. And it's basically impossible with projects like this to just, you couldn't have possibly predicted what's gonna happen, like the final outcome, unless you go through this process. So would you have any advice for people who, who want to do something like that? I mean, obviously not your project, but things of that magnitude and this kind of exploration. How can they navigate things like getting funding, just securing this kind of academic rigor, also from the research standpoint, and just still being able to be free and creative and open-minded, and just have this comfort of having a patience to just, I'm just going to see what happens, and I'm going to see where it takes me. And I know it's a very difficult question, and I know it's just probably impossible to answer it fully, but I was just wondering if you might have any advices.
I think, I mean, the first funding I got was from the university to do, and I did the interviews. I paid a cinematographer and a sound person. I mean, that would probably be impossible now. There's no, I mean, even, that was 2022. It's like, okay, there's no money.
I was going to say, what is university
$3,000. So I started with the interview. So then I had, I had something. I mean, this project was also, it was not difficult to fund because the story, people know this story, people know the theatre, it's sort of three, aging theatre women. There's a lot of respect and admiration for this theatre, so it is well known. So I think, and having people on board that were, had a rich history. Like I was probably the, definitely the least experienced in the arts. So the people I worked with, had track records of being funded. I mean, I would never get this. I mean, I guess also it helps to shift away from film, because I can't get arts funding for film. You can only get film funding, and I probably wouldn't have got film funding for this. So, I took it into more of a kind of theatre live, live artwork kind of space. But really, I think, working with people that had really good track records. So my collaborators were all really experienced in, in their fields and been funded. So, but also had, I got money from, there was a local kind of not-for-profit that funds sort of community projects. And I just, they gave me, I just asked, they said, I'll put in an application, we're meeting tomorrow. And then they like, oh yeah, like rang me up. It's like, yeah, here's $15,000, so, there were, I mean, I think just because the project and because people knew the story and the place, and it was, easy to fund, but that's not very helpful because that's not usually the kind of projects that I make. So I just think, having a really long period of time as well, like working over, many years, like sort of working iteratively, just sort of doing things and sort of snowballing it, I guess, is a really good approach. And I guess the nature of this sort of allowed that. And actually working in academia allows that too, in a way that, you know, like some of my collaborators were like, this is great because we're working on it for, you know, like over a long period of time. Usually most of their projects where they just come and they, you know, only get paid for a short amount of time and they have to do the project. So people really liked working over this long period of time. I don't know if I answered the question. I mean, I guess this project was so many things coming together that sort of made it work. But I think just that sort of iterative process where you can build and I do think collaborating with people. I mean, like I learned so much about collaborating, working with these people as a documentary maker who usually does my own projects. Like people bringing skills in a completely different field. It's just like, oh my God, like these people are amazing.
It sounds really fascinating. Now I'm aware of time and I know that it's really late where you are. I know that we have a couple of comments in the chat, so people who had to leave earlier because of other meeting, they were all, you know, absolutely fascinated by your talk. So everyone's just saying thank you, they really enjoyed. So we probably have time for one final quick question if there's anyone in the room who wants to ask one. Okay, I think I put too much pressure, as I was saying, you know, but no, thank you so much, Kim. It was just genuinely wonderful to hear you talk about it.
Thank you.
Maybe I can just ask a very, very quick one. Do you know what the next project is? What's next for you?
My next project. Well, I'm trying to finish a book.
All right.
But I do want to, you know, I would love to work with some of these people. Like, yeah, the choir. I'd really like to work with the choir, and I'm in the choir now. So,
amazing.
Yeah, and actually, you know, often they'll talk about, you know, that the project, and they all just loved it. And it's like, and also because I mean, it's not about the money, but there's like, this is the first time we've got, you know, been paid. And it's just like actually a big thing. They've just,
nice.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it felt like a very equal, you know, collaborative process. It wasn't just somebody coming in saying, I want to, you know, the services of the choir. It was actually just really built, you know, so, I would really like to work with the choir and the choir leader. You know, I'm very interested in that area. There's a lot of sort of environmental, I don't know, issues and sort of spaces around there. And it's around where they're going to build these big nuclear submarines at this AUKUS. I don't know if you've heard about AUKUS. It's the Australian, UK, American submarine nuclear base. Anyway.
All right.
No, so there's some, yeah, I don't know. Again, it'll be a very slow process.
Okay. Sounds fascinating. Well, I'm going to definitely be keeping an eye on that. So once again, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And I'll definitely have to post your Rebellious Research coffee mug at some point. And I will be uploading this recording at some point today, because it's going to be your tomorrow for sure. Yes, thank you so much, Krzysztof.
Thank you.
So everyone loved it. So yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and happy New Year to all of you.
Yeah, you too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.